say you need to practice spectruming. So where are you? Where's the polar opposite? So now all of a sudden it starts to become like into the Frisbee piece. So there I am at the top. Okay, acquire the target, throw it.
So one of the more important elements that we see with the professional golfer that helps them create a functional pivot and a well-sequenced golf swing from address to the top of the motion and coming back down into impact and the follow-through is their ability to let their head swivel.
A little bit, yes.
A little bit, yeah. So we often see that players, and there's a huge misconception surrounding this with the recreational golfer, is they hit a bad shot and their buddies will say, oh, you lifted your head. Well, as you can see, I didn't lift my head, did I?
Yes.
Right? My head stayed down, just the bottom of the swing was too high and came through and hit the top of the ball. Now, believe it or not, by keeping your head down, you can actually encourage more of those shots.
Yes.
Right? And what we see with the professional golfer relative to their mobility and flexibility is that their head, if you're drawing a circle around where it starts, would stay relatively within that, but you would see that their sight line here would begin to move a little bit.
Correct.
And that helps facilitate rotation relative to your individual body.
Yes.
So what I want you to do is just talk about what we see with the professional golfer in regards to the movement of their head, because I feel like that is a very misunderstood concept in the golf swing.
Well, I think keeping your head down is like the worst piece of advice that you can tell anybody. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that I would prefer that the eyes follow the ball, that you'd keep your eye on the ball, and then you would utilize full real vision, which would help improve your hand-eye coordination. Okay, I think that's a big piece versus keeping your head down, which then really doesn't let your rib cage rotate open.
Correct.
Okay, now, sure, somebody's going to comment on YouTube, right? That, well, Sergio doesn't do it, or there are certain players. Yes, and I would agree, and I've got Sergio in the database. Now, the average Gears Tour model also includes a Sergio, also includes somebody I would say would be at the other end of the spectrum of a Dustin Johnson. When we're looking at the Tour average model, it's all the Tour players in the system thrown in a bucket, and what in the world do they look like? So the average Tour model look, if we were to look at, okay, what would everybody look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome to go by. And then if I needed to highlight something specific on a player, then I'd pull the player.
Yeah.
Right? But I would say that for a vast majority of golfers, mid to high handicappers, right? Swiveling the sight line, using and understanding full rear vision, because everybody kind of like, well, if I swivel, I can't see the ball. No, my eyes are still on the ball.
Yeah.
Right? So if I use your nose as a ball and you're looking at my eyes, as I swivel my head, you can see like my eyes kind of move to the corners and I can see you.
Correct.
And then vice versa, as they start to go down, I kind of let my chin ride the shoulder a little bit, which allows my sight lines to kind of turn, get in front of the ball, but my eyes stay.
Yeah.
And then as I release the club, it pulls my head, and then my eyes start to follow the golf ball a lot faster.
So it's not as robotic as where my head goes, my eyes have to go.
Yeah, your eyes would stay focused on my target.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you start talking to people about that, like, I can't see the ball. I'm like, no, keep your eyes on the ball.
Yeah, just allow that head.
Just allow, some freedom in the turn, which should be really similar, again, going back to some of the other stuff that we talked about being an athlete.
Yeah.
I love, like, I'll use my field over there, not now because it's so cold, but we'll go over there and we'll throw clubs, which I think is an awesome piece.
I love that.
Right? But inside, I like Frisbees.
Okay. All right.
So if I give you that Frisbee and I ask you to throw it as a left-hander or show me the motion, what do you do?
Oh God, I might hit you.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's just, so you're there. See the head?
Yeah.
You're not keeping your head
down
to the right as you're trying to throw. Right? It really hurts.
Yeah.
Right? And then that also starts to lead into some of the chicken winging pieces.
Yeah. And just relating back to that video we just did before about the elbows staying and squeezing post-impact and how the lower body's working as well.
Even the lower body.
Just a natural motion with this Frisbee or discus would essentially be exactly the same feeling as what we would want in the golf swing.
Now, for somebody who has a lot more freedom and range of motion. Me, when I was younger, I could keep my head down for longer, right, and still hit my positions, and I just can't do it any longer. It just creates too much stress and starts to hurt. So allowing some of the head to swivel is okay. Right? Again, we're looking for certain relationships and alignments at the various positions that would, one, and most importantly, reduce stress on the body.
So important.
Right? That is the most important component to this. And then as soon as we start to relieve stress in the body and we try to get our body where the joints are kind of more in the middle of their range of motion versus to the extremes, I would start to say you have a greater chance of getting better sequencing and creating more efficiency in the golf swing than it is stressing a joint segment.
I totally agree. So just that whole Frisbee, just the feeling and the intent, even without throwing it, I can see and feel that my head would naturally go through. And just quickly relating in regards to, say, being an athlete, I'll grab the club back off you. We talk about if you were playing tennis is a great one as well. Let's say the ball's
tennis racket on the other side.
Let's say the ball's coming into play, is the whole keep your head down. You never see someone play tennis to do this.
No.
Right? Because even though the ball is struck somewhat out in front of us, really our target is not the ball, our target is down there. And if we are making the ball our target, our body is going to stop rotating. Then we can see obviously a breakdown of structure of the rest of the pieces here. So having the intent of swinging this golf club through the positions rather than trying to position it for the sake of achieving a certain outcome.
Yes, I would say with a good component to it, he's all the way over there, is I use the relationship in terms of, it's really exaggerated, right? Is finding the target and then release it, right? So if you kind of use that Frisbee piece again as your motion, right? You're not throwing the arm, so to speak, until you start to turn, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So you're acquiring the target with your eyes, and then you're applying the release. So I'm going to do a little plug. This is the One Club. I'm not sure you've seen it.
No, I haven't, no.
It's an inertia-based training system that would train release, speed and power. You could add more weights. You can change the resistance levels, and this is all specific and customizable to the player's speeds. Okay. So in this guy, kind of what we're talking about in terms of the Frisbee. If I start to throw him too soon, I'd get the pop out here. Yes, we would agree that we would want the pop somewhere over here in an ideal world. But when we start to try to, again, somebody who's casting, I would say you need to practice spectruming. So where are you? Where's the polar opposite? So now all of a sudden it starts to become like into the Frisbee piece. So there I am at the top. Okay, acquire the target, throw it.
Awesome.
Acquire the target, throw it. So if you were to try that, now he's in a really light setting. So probably for somebody swinging about 70 miles an hour, because I think that's the last person that somebody used.
Two hands or?
You can either way. If you want to kind of go back to the Frisbee piece, we can start with the Frisbee.
So this release point here should be?
As the exaggerated piece for somebody kind of throwing it too soon, we would practice delaying the throw.
So let's
say you to turn.
I'm a player for the purposes of this, right? It's just going and doing that, as opposed to allowing the head to move
and then throw. Kind of similar to again, when you start to look at how the trail arm is working with tour players down at impact, it's not straight. It's still a little external, right? It's still sitting here, and then they start to kind of straightening it out well after.
Absolutely. And this is a great feeling to get that. Absolutely. All right, so you can load up different weights and
you make it heavier. So if you wanted to kind of focus on some power, I'd put more weight. I would change it from the thin bands to the really thick bands. And again, there's a chart. You go by how fast you swing the driver, and that would be your starting point. And then if I wanted to really overemphasize something, I might go lighter. And then get you to kind of release a club someplace entirely different. Right? And then utilize that feel. So if we take that feel, like that we just used with the Frisbee and then the One Club,
even
start
then
to feel is like
straight away
right out in front.
I think visualization is very important for this as well. It's like I am now imagining I've still got this Frisbee in my hand, and where would that throwing sensation come into play? And I can really, when I do this, feel a delay of this movement of the club at the top, which would be the exaggeration to someone who's doing this move, as my body is then turning and rotating, my neck is swiveling.
Eyes are still on the ball, right? Your head is swiveled, but my eyes are still on the ball.
Yeah.
It helps me keep my eye on the ball, and then all of a sudden I can kind of release it. It just creates a much more free flowing swing.
Yeah. So let's say then a player looks or videos their swing, or they get a lesson from a pro, and they see that their head is staying dead still, and if we're looking at our shoulders as a reference, not really rotating, let's say approximately 90 degrees in the backswing. Yeah. How would they go about working on this, let's say in a golf swing setting on the range, going, is it a matter of just feeling like the chin is freely rotating back, or just getting a dry drill feel, first of all, of doing this and going, okay, if I go and keep my head dead still, I can only achieve this much rotation, which for me is, then if I allow my neck and my head and my chin slightly to move to the right, well, now all of a sudden I can still keep my eye on the ball.
Yeah. I would say this, right? So as you're doing that, I would say that the butt of the club would point maybe about a foot or so behind the golf ball.
Say in line with the right angle. Yeah.
Yeah, so see it?
Yep, perfect.
You could even put a stick in the ground if you wanted.
Yep.
Okay. That would be okay as well. Trying to get it to point outside the stick without your head moving to the outside of the stick.
Yeah.
So we'd still keep the head relatively stationary. Now, in the transition feel, right, it would be just a sensation of trying to feel that the chin and the left shoulder, the spacing doesn't increase. So if you kept your head back, and I'll start to rotate or down, see how it's opening too much.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
See it? He's opening too much.
Yeah, it feels weird.
I would say that, for some people, right, you have a little bit more mobility, right, in space between your chin and your left shoulder. But for others who don't, is the feeling, instead of that thing opening up, that the chin would ride the shoulder for a little longer.
Oh yeah, that feels great. That's a great sensation. I've never conceptualized doing that before, as in the chin and the lead shoulder would kind of
Let them ride, yeah. And then they'll start to separate later on in the swing. When I start to kind of get my arms out back and in front of me, they'll start to separate a little bit more.
Yeah.
But for some people, like in here, like again, spectrum practicing, it's like you're going to feel that the chin never loses the shoulder. So you're going to try to keep it on there for an eternity, even though you can't.
Yeah.
But you're going to try to do that, and then you start to calibrate what you think you did with the camera, and then you might need to add more or less, or, oh my God, I went way too much.
Yeah.
But ultimately, again, it kind of goes back into, you're trying to change your feels. It'll feel weird, but we're trying to facilitate change to the camera. And you change the picture.
Yeah.
And then we would have to practice the other side of the extreme, and we'd have to do it as slow or as fast, but we have to slow it down until you can actually change the picture.
Yeah.
Then I'd slowly start to ramp up the speeds. But I like kind of what I would call this is like the Frisbee pattern. So I teach different kind of patterns to people, and it kind of keeps things organized to make sure that we don't mix and match components.
Yeah.
Is that the Frisbee pattern, I love the pattern. One of the big components and checklists would be a little bit of that backing in, a little bit of the chin riding the left shoulder, and the real simple component to really hammering in the details, right, is very kinesthetic based, very not so technical based. Just go throw clubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
Right? And it's fun. You practice with your throwing clubs left-handed. You practice throwing clubs right-handed.
Yeah.
What does it look like versus what your swing looks like?
Yeah.
And then start to kind of morph them together. Okay, I got to feel this.
Yeah.
You'll create certain sensations. Then you start to try to keep those sensations as if you're trying to hit a golf ball normal, as in a golf swing. But conceptually, you're trying to clean up some of the conceptions and beliefs that you have of how to swing the club. And a lot of times when you start to clean up those conceptions, all of a sudden you can start to facilitate some really cool changes.
Yeah.
And again, it's the balance between players who need the technical piece to give them, so they understand what the task is. And then from there is what can we do in terms of some simple concepts, in terms of training, that would allow the player to be able to facilitate those changes without overbearing them. Like, I'm a really good player where I love to be super technical.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, okay, I get it. Okay, now I've got to try to simplify this. So it's more bite-sized so that when I go play golf, I'm not overwhelmed with thoughts.
Yeah. One thing I'll just add in regards to the follow-through motion, because I feel like so many players working on their game, they're so wound up in impact and post and making sure they're not chicken winging, flipping it, is that you must get this backswing piece sorted before that follow through. If you're a player and you're not rotating, you're not allowing that neck to swivel, then as hard as you try and do this Frisbee motion, it's the same as setting up and just using your arm.
Yes.
We must get the backswing piece, get that rotation, because that facilitates then the ability to get that follow through piece.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, it always boils down to, this is like dominoes,
Yeah.
right? We've got to set up the dominoes, and we want to set up the dominoes at the beginning,
Yeah.
which is the setup, the arm, the backswing pieces, because all that has an effect on what the follow-through components are going to be. Now, you can train a little bit sometimes if somebody needs to isolate just the follow-through.
Yeah.
You can, and I will, as long as the backswing pieces are good.
Yeah.
Backswing, downswing pieces. If those are pretty good, then we can just sit and do some stuff from impact going forward.
Yeah.
But if the stuff prior to is a little bit off, just trying to fix the follow-through is just not going to do it, because you haven't set up the other pieces to make that efficient.
Yeah. So I would say let's put this in entire little bow on this for the players at home, is going, when you are filming your swing, and you can do this in a mirror, but preferably to have a camera because you're going to be able to get the follow through piece better, is that if you're looking at your eyes, and just by simply lifting your eyesight, keeping your head down in its posture, lifting your eyesight so you can see yourself in a mirror, very much so with this camera, and making sure your eyes are staying on the camera as you first of all map this out and rehearse that feeling with the shoulders. Then looking down at the golf ball, it's going to look slightly different to what you're used to.
Yeah.
And then that would be a great sensation for the backswing. And then in the follow through, if you're a player who tends to want to kind of keep their head down and they're not rotating, their arms are bunching up, just getting that sensation that Dennis just gave us of keeping the chin riding the shoulder for longer,
Yes.
then produces that real whip through impact.
And if you really feel like you're adding too much extension in the cervical spine, right? So it's set up looking up.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would just take my iPhone or camera and then put it on the ground a little bit more tilted, so that I can maintain my forward tilt of the neck versus adding too much extension in there to look at it, because then it would make it a little bit harder to turn. So I would just add that. There are times where I will do that with players, but then there's going to be times where I'd want that thing on the ground.
Yeah.
Right, and then the nice thing in terms of the video, if you're wearing a hat like your Puma hat, right, you'd watch the P, right? So we would be able to see it kind of swiveling to the right a little bit, and then as you start your follow through, it would start to kind of churn and tilt. So if we kind of looked at it in terms of like how Gears uses it, right, it's just a line that kind of comes out of your eyes and your head. That's where that hat would be, that we would want to feel it. You kind of
right on the tip.
a little bit more back and forth that way. I think that's a really nice feel.
All right, so I'm just going to map this feeling out just once, then I'm going to go ahead and hit one. So feeling that my eyes are staying on the ball, but I'm allowing some freedom of rotation, the chin riding the shoulder for a little bit. Let's hit one, see how it comes out.
Perfect.
Getting better and better, love it.
Pretty good, man. Okay, so if we start looking at the sight lines of the tour average model, you can see it kind of comes out right between the eyes. And then as they start to make this motion in the swing, you'll start to see it kind of, like what we talked about, it starts to kind of churn a little bit more to the right. And you can see, if we kind of started to look at just some body lines, you can see how much they've churned. Now, from the transition, you can see like this is where, I would say like the head can ride the shoulder a little bit.
Yeah, perfect.
So it starts to kind of open up the rib cage. I would love to see a little bit of that, right? You know, a little bit, if we were to kind of say anything, like by the time we would kind of get to, again, mid down, which would be P6, that's what, like a 30-degree angle between the ball line and the sight line. And then what you'll start to see is the head just kind of stays there a little bit more for a little while, right? And then it starts to follow a little bit nicer. I think the triangles is a nice little concept for people. Shoulder, shoulder, there's the ear to ear, that the triangles kind of match up. Yeah. And you can see that the left shoulder is working way behind the base of the neck again, where a lot of times you see people who are chicken winging, you know, their head is, the head triangle is still down. Yeah. Their arms are now way open, and then from the face on view, you still see the shoulder in view. It hasn't gotten out of the way.
Yeah, sure.
So that's where the head really helps those players who keep their head down for too long and have this crazy chicken wing piece going on. It's trying to get the head to swivel to let some of the shoulder to kind of get out of the way a little bit nicer.